Buenos días, señoras y señores. It's a real pleasure for me to be here at the 5th Oil, Gas, and Energy Summit. It's actually my first time in Bogota, Colombia. And over the last couple of days, I have already seen the magical beauty of this country. The country of Bolivar, Botero, Gabo Marquez, Shakira. And today, I wanted to say hello and thank you to this room filled of men and women who work in the energy sector. Because indeed, your work impacts everyone. It impacts the society, the economy, the politics, industry, foreign policy, security, and geopolitics. Today, I will speak with you largely about geopolitics. And we're going to take a look at the global energy markets. Because indeed, today, we're living in a small world. It's a small world of globalization, of a global economy, of global trade, and indeed, of a global energy market. But there have been some significant changes, and today I'll discuss with you the new era of energy. So, what has changed? Who are these new players? What are the new conditions? And certainly, without a doubt, if we take a global perspective at the energy markets, we see that the United States has emerged as an energy superpower. Certainly, previous President Trump has made it a vocal policy of his to spread America's energy superpower. And yesterday, he announced that he's going to be running again for the American presidency. But what have been these important developments coming from the United States? Over the past 10 years, the United States emerged as the largest producer of oil and natural gas in the world. It also emerged as an LNG exporter, liquefied natural gas, in 2016. And this year, in 2022, the United States became the largest LNG exporter in the world. Also, when it comes to climate change, because of America's energy production, domestic energy production, the United States was able to cut in half its reliance on coal and therefore meet some of its climate change obligations and goals, because primarily of its increased reliance on natural gas. So what made all of this possible? This energy superpowerdom of the United States and these changing conditions. Certainly the shale revolution, the North American shale revolution. 4 countries have led the way. The United States, Canada, China, and Argentina have been the countries that have successfully and commercially fracked. And at the same time, what we've seen, that while fracking has been somewhat controversial, it has also been reassessed by countries in Europe. We've seen Britain that had at first had a ban on fracking, then it canceled this ban, and now again reinstated it. We see France again discussing whether they will restart fracking in the country. What else? What else we see in these energy markets? One, and most importantly, we see tremendous changes in the global gas markets. And as I wrote in my book, The New Geopolitics of Natural Gas, published by Harvard University Press, we've truly today see a global gas market, and one with new suppliers, new demand centers, and new ways of doing business. The geopolitical implications of this new energy order have been significant. On the one hand, we're seeing the reduced importance of OPEC, with the United States now emerging as a key oil producer. And we've also seen the reduced importance of Russia as a gas supplier within the European Union, with American LNG exports entering the continent. But that has been the supply side. What about on the demand side? We see new centers of demand today. The United States is no longer that key importer that used to be for many, many decades. And in Europe as well, we see the demand for gas plateauing. At the same time, we see where the future of energy demand will be, and that's China and India. These countries have vast appetite for energy and huge populations, rapid economic development, so they will remain the future of energy demand. At the same time, when President Biden came into office, he came also with an ambitious plan. His plan was to make the United States a clean energy, a renewables superpower. There was a huge budget, $2 trillion, to cut emissions, to go to net zero emissions by 2050, to create new infrastructure, new electric vehicles, big, big plans. But there have been three factors that have upset these positive developments in the global energy markets. Does anyone want to shout out what you think those three factors are that have changed how we view energy policy? Anyone, what do you think? Well, okay, I'll tell you. So we've indeed seen a perfect storm of events. And the three key factors that have been first in these last couple of years, the COVID pandemic, that has challenged our globalized world, that has reduced the demand for energy, that has challenged global trade, the free movement of people, the free movement of goods. Geography became important again. What was local became important again. And it frankly, the COVID pandemic years appended this era that has been called the flat world by Thomas Friedman, the economist and New York Times columnist. The second factor, of course, without a doubt, has been the war in Ukraine. In February 24th, when Russia invaded Ukraine, you can say that the post-Cold War era truly ended. Geopolitics came back to the forefront of every government's mind. And third, highly related, is we've seen an emergence of global competition between democracies and autocracies, between governments led by democratically elected leaders and between dictators. So these three factors have created another new reality in the global energy markets. What is this new reality? Well, it's a divided and a more fragmented global energy market. We've seen the West, particularly the United States, the United Kingdom, the European Union enact sanctions against Russia, oil and gas sanctions. And at the same time, we've seen Russia shut off gas supplies to Germany through the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and via Ukrainian pipeline system. This is significant because Russia supplies about 8% of the global oil supply, and it contributed about a third of the European Union's gas needs. And what we've had a global energy crisis in particular in Europe, a real gas crunch, because Europe was 40% dependent on Russian gas in 2021. That quickly fell to 8% just over this year. We've had soaring energy prices, lots of concerns regarding the future of manufacturing on the continent, soaring electricity prices, and of course, this winter is going to be a key winter. How will Europe survive this winter? Energy supplies, reserves, gas reserves are filled up, but there's still great concerns. So I want to show you this map here. This is the two maps of Europe. And on the one hand, here we see the direct impact of gas shortages. The countries that have been most impacted by gas shortages are the ones highlighted in red. This is really the industrial heartland of Europe. Germany, Austria, other Central and Eastern European countries. And on the second map, we see in blue, in fact, the expected GDP change, the decline in GDP in Europe. If you look, these maps, in fact, overlap quite significantly. It's the countries that have felt the greatest impact of the gas shortage in this crisis are the ones that are going to face the greatest economic and GDP decline. In fact, today, we are talking about deindustrialization of Europe more and more. In fact, when I return to the United States, tomorrow on Monday, the topic of my discussion on Monday is deindustrialization of Europe. This is a real reality. The high energy costs, the shortages of energy, is making it increasingly uneconomical to manufacture or pursue industry on the European continent. And of course, this has had an impact well beyond Europe. Energy prices, gas prices have increased in the United States at the pump. In the European Union, people are concerned, citizens, how are they going to heat their homes this winter? Because in winter, a lot of the European population depends on gas for heating. So we see protests, we see signs like here. Are we going to heat or are we going to eat this winter? Freeze prices, not people. Again, the impact has also been geopolitical. When OPEC decided to cut oil production, they signaled that in this moment in time that they're perhaps allying with Russia. This is certainly going to help Russia with the cuts of oil production and the maintenance of higher energy prices. Sanctions, again, are continuing the war for gas. So what are some of these responses? What is the world doing? What should Colombia think about? Well, we've seen, while President Biden is still certainly very committed to climate change and the transition, as we've seen at the COP27, we've also seen a certain rebalancing of the Biden administration, reconsiderations of the importance of energy security and geopolitics. So the Biden administration in the last year has really sought to gear up again LNG exports, shale production, and investment in energy infrastructure. Indeed, this has been about rebalancing the energy transition, as I said, with the two important goals in mind: energy security and geopolitics. So, some other conclusions. In my belief, natural gas is absolutely here to stay. Natural gas serves not only as the cleanest fossil fuel and as a transition fuel, but I expect it to remain an important mix in our future, alongside renewables, solar, wind, and other energy. When we look also at the gas industry overall, LNG, I believe, will be, and already is increasingly, the future in the gas markets. The percentage of LNG as a portion of the overall global gas trade has been consistently increasing. More countries are investing in LNG export and import infrastructure because of the flexibility it allows, and again, because of the benefits of gas. Particularly, as I mentioned before, we will see that demand in Asia for LNG, in China, India, and beyond. So here, I wanted to read a little bit. This is a famous renewables supporter, Elon Musk. At the start of, soon after the start of the war, on March 4th, Elon Musk tweeted, "Hate to say it, but we need to increase oil and gas output immediately. Extraordinary times demand extraordinary measures." And he reiterated this opinion as well when he was in Norway. And in Norway again, he said, "I do think we actually need more oil and gas for civilization to function, but simultaneously moving fast towards sustainable energy economy." So again, one of the greatest supporters of renewables, of solar, of electric energy, Elon Musk, on the absolute need of oil and gas, particularly in these times of geopolitical crises. So the events I've described, they've certainly led a ripple effect across the world, across industries, across continents. In the global, of course, the essence of the global energy crisis, and particularly in geopolitics. So now I would like to consider some takeaways for Colombia. There are a number of lessons to learn from what has happened, particularly in Europe, in the past year and more. I think one key lesson we can take away is energy self-reliance, energy independence. Colombia is blessed to have its own natural resources that can make it possible for it to have energy independence and energy reliance. It's certainly important for energy security, for its economy, for its industry. The second key factor is, of course, the importance of the energy transition, but the energy transition on your own terms. In Europe, a number of countries pursued their own energy transition path, and I think we can already learn from some of the failures. And one I'll highlight is Germany in particular. Germany had a very ambitious renewables revolution agenda, but encountered several issues because it couldn't implement it fast enough. So Germany had their own nuclear energy production, which first they started shutting down, then they started shutting down the use of coal, and the hope was that until they come to the renewables future, they can rely on cheap gas from Russia. Unfortunately, this has proved to be that these resources have been unreliable, because it's difficult to rely on an unstable, somewhat country like Russia and on essentially a dictatorial regime. So this winter will truly be a test case for the people of Germany, how they will fare, how they will survive it. So again, Colombia's transition should happen in light of its own unique circumstances regarding its own resources, economy, and political system. Of course, climate change and renewables will continue to be the focus of our future. As we saw in COP27, there was a rally for renewables, a rally for unity on the global change. Biden apologized for his predecessor for President Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Accords, but we will see again now with President Trump entering the political campaign. We'll see what will happen in the future. There's been a big call for the global oil and gas industry to reduce methane emissions. And that's also a lesson for Colombia to consider for your industry, for your oil and gas industry, to what extent you can cut your methane emissions. Another key element to consider for Colombia is that indeed we are in a geopolitical contest. We are in a contest between autocracies and democracies. And I can say there will be no sidelines in this geopolitical competition. Colombia will have to take a side. And as the oldest democracy in Latin America, the second oldest democracy in North and South America after United States, I think Colombia has to also lead by example and make its position very clear where it stands in this geopolitical divide. Certainly, geography and geopolitics will continue to dictate our global markets and the global energy sector, as we've seen from the impact of COVID and, of course, from the war in Ukraine. Because really, it's important to remember, we are living in a highly globalized, highly interconnected, but at the same time, a fragile and fragmented world. So I want to thank you for your attention, and I look forward to our conversation right now.